Welcome to the Modal Notes. This is a little mini-series I'm doing that's going to be talking about the music of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which just came out a few days ago. Now, the soundtrack of Rogue One is the first non-John Williams Star Wars soundtrack. So naturally, when I've talked to people about it, they've been a little underwhelmed or unexpected by the type of music that Michael Giacchino has written for it. Now granted, Rogue One is a different type of movie. It's advertised as a war movie, so naturally its whole tone is going to be different, which includes its music. But just because the tone is different doesn't mean it's bad. And in fact, even though it sounds very different than John Williams, because Giacchino has a very different background than Williams does, it still carries many of the same key traits that Williams does. That is, the use of motifs, the use of themes, the use of a romantic style, and the use of various quotes and elements, which is basically what I'm going to be talking about today when talking about the theme of the main protagonist, Jyn Erso. So, that was the theme I was just playing now. So obviously I don't have access to a score or anything, but that's just what I've managed to pick out on the piano from listening to the soundtrack over and over the past few days, just eating it up. So, I'm going to talk first about the structure of Jyn's theme. Just get right into it. So I want to talk about how it's composed large scale and how it's composed small scale. So large scale, it's composed in what's called ABA form, which is also called sonata form, because that's how the sonatas of the classical period would often be composed. So the ABA form basically means that in the A section, you get a theme that's introduced, and it's just laid out in the A section. Then in the B section, you get the development. The A section was called the exposition, by the way. That's the technical term. In the B section, you get the development, where it takes that theme and, well, develops it. It picks it apart in different ways and just sees where it can go with it. Sometimes it's not that impressive. Sometimes it's way different than how the theme originally sounded. And then in the Return of the Jedi... Oh, did I say Jedi? I meant A section. In the Return of the A section, you get what's called the recapitulation, where the theme is played over again, but it's usually in a more majestic way, which is exactly what you get in this piece. So first you get the theme, which is... And talking about the theme, we can go ahead and talk about the small scale structure I'm talking about, which is Giacchino's use of motifs. Now, a motif is slightly different than a theme. A motif is usually contained within a theme, and it's just a very small musical phrase that represents a person. So, say, in the case of Darth Vader, you have a whole theme dedicated to him, but the motif would just be... It's just a very small motif that's used whenever, say, Darth Vader comes on screen, or whenever he does something important, you would hear that Vader motif. And that's the case with Jyn as well. So in this case, her motif is just... And her whole theme is just built on... You hear it 4 times just in the A section, you know. So that's the A section. So let's move on to the B section. So first you get a small modulating bridge between the A section and the B section. And the purpose of the modulating bridge, it's usually between 2 themes within an exposition. But in this case, it's between the A and B section, where it modulates to a new key. So you leave off in D major, and then it unexpectedly transitions to E minor, and then it goes to B minor, and you hear the motif again. And the strings echo that in C. Then you go back to B minor and get it again. And then suddenly, randomly, it goes to the B section, which is in C minor. And then it goes back into the A section. So the development is a little harder to talk about, because what often happens in a development is that you get inversions of the theme or the motif, and you get it switched around in different ways. So this motif, I'm just going to call the A motif for lack of a better term. So you get this A motif, which is followed by a B motif. And the B motif is really just a smaller version of the A motif. It's just without the third note. So instead of, you just get. So even the B motif is drawn from the A motif. So everything in Jin Urso's theme is drawn from. But anyway, first you get the A theme, then the B motif, and the A motif again, the B motif again. And now you get the opposite reciprocal of what you just heard. Instead of getting A, then B, you get inverted B, and then inverted A. So first, instead of getting, you get, so it goes up instead of down. And then instead of getting, it goes up instead of down again. So instead of, you get opposite B, opposite A, which then goes into a whole nother very expansive sounding theme. And then you get this little theme here, which I'm not going to talk about just yet because it's drawn from another thing that I'm going to talk about later. So then we come back to the recapitulation where you get these very militaristic sounding chords. So that is basically the structure of Jin's theme. Very Williams, very romantic. It uses motifs and it uses the sonata form. So that's all very interesting, but it is very esoteric, as it were. But there are a few other things about it which also lend credence to the idea that it is very related to Williams. And one of these is the interval that starts Jin's theme, which is what's called a minor sixth. You count intervals by just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's in minor instead of major, which should be. But the minor sixth is something that's used a lot by John Williams in his more romantic themes. Say, in Attack of the Clones, when you get Anakin and Padme's love theme, you get a minor sixth again. You get that interval again. And then in Han Solo and the Princess, in Han and Leia's love theme, you get same interval, just in major. And as far back as Princess Leia's theme, you get same interval again. And Princess Leia's theme is really a kind of love theme, in case you don't know, because George Lucas didn't even know that Princess Leia was going to end up being Luke's sister until Return of the Jedi. So Leia's theme was actually intended originally to be a Luke and Leia love theme. So, of course, when John Williams found out that they were going to end up being brother and sister, he thought, oh no, I better write something else that indicates their new relationship, that indicates Luke and Leia's relationship. So he wrote Luke and Leia. But that's beside the point. So again, you get this minor sixth in Jin's theme, which is a sort of interval of longing, desire, because you hear it in all these romantic themes. And Jin is also looking for something. And by the way, I haven't spoiled anything yet, which is good, but spoiler alert, I will be getting into spoilers. So if you've gotten this far in the video, I would just advise you stop it, go see Rogue One, and then come back and finish. So anyway, Jin's looking for something. In this case, she's looking for her father. So again, you get that interval of longing. Okay, now the final thing is the most interesting. Did you know, again, spoiler alert, that if you just listen to Jin's theme very closely, you should know that she's going to die at the end? Now that may sound crazy, but there is a little theme that's contained within her theme that lets you know that, and it's called the Dies Irae. The Dies Irae was a chant that was sung in a medieval requiem that would be sung at someone's funeral, and Dies Irae is Latin for Day of Wrath, so naturally it's kind of dour sounding. So it would originally be Dies Irae, Dies Irae. Sorry for my bad singing. So that doesn't exactly sound like Jin's theme, right? You know. But if you take the rhythm out of Jin's theme, you can hear it. You hear the same 4 notes there. Now you may be thinking, Paul, that's a little far-fetched. I mean, I understand that you're a big classical fan and all, but the idea that the Dies Irae is contained within that, and that Giacchino meant to do that, just seems a little far-fetched to me. And that'd be true if it weren't included in so many other compositions. As far back as the Romantic composers such as Franz Liszt and Hector Berlioz, they were actually using this same Dies Irae. They were using that same melody in their own compositions to signify death, say in Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. So, as far back as the 1800s, people were using this to signify death, and in fact, John Williams has in Star Wars as well, so it's a well-established tradition. Say, in the original Star Wars, you get, when Luke finds out that his aunt and uncle have most likely been killed by stormtroopers, he runs to his land speeder and hops in, and you hear this in the cellos when he's racing back to the homestead. You hear which, if you listen closely, is actually an inverted Dies Irae. Instead of you get, and to further seal the deal, in that famous scene where Luke is standing, looking off into the setting twin suns and contemplating going out and having adventures. At first you hear the famous Force theme. But then you hear the Dies Irae theme. Just like that, very clearly, the Dies Irae twice in a row. And then in Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin is killing all the Jedi in the Jedi Temple, and the Jedi are being slaughtered across the galaxy, you hear it all over the soundtrack titled Anakin's Betrayal. You hear... So again, you hear... Dies Irae over and over again, even within John Williams. So, what is the purpose of this Dies Irae theme within Jin's theme? Well, to answer that, I want to look at a specific track within the Rogue One, which is called Rebellions Are Built in Hope, which is actually sort of the turning point in Jin's character arc. So to this point, she's been like, oh, I don't care about the rebellion, I don't care about any causes. If you look down, you won't see the Imperial flags flying over you. But you get here when she's on the base in Yavin, and she gives a little speech to the rebels about rebellions are built on hope. We have to hope. But at the beginning of this track, you just hear the cellos playing Jin's theme without any rhythm added to it. You just hear. So Giacchino is obviously trying to make the connection, especially because right afterwards you hear the woodwinds go. Clearly setting Dies Irae apart from the rest of the theme. And this is significant because this is the point at which Jin decides to go on what's essentially a suicide mission to where the Death Star plans are located. So it's given significance because the Dies Irae is playing as she's being given the mission that will lead her to her death. And if you think about it, the whole of Rogue One is basically telling the story of her death and of the other main character's deaths. So Jin's theme is basically also her death knell if you listen very closely. So that's Jin's theme for you. That the structure of her theme is very closely related to Williams, and the way her theme is made up is also very similar to how Williams would do it. So I'm planning on doing a few of these, so next time I'm going to talk about 3 more themes that Giacchino writes, which is the theme for the Imperials, the theme for Krennic, who's the main bad guy, and the theme for the Guardians of the Wills, which is Baze Malbus and Chirrut Îmwe. But for now, I want to do a little, what's it called? I'm going to talk about another podcast that I would recommend that you listen to. If this sort of analysis of Star Wars music is what you're interested in, and you think that you might be interested in listening to more of this, except talking about by a professional, I would suggest that you listen to a podcast that's called Star Wars Oxygen. It's hosted by a guy named David W. Collins, He's worked in the Lucasfilm industry. He's done a lot of voice acting in Star Wars video games, and he in fact played a stormtrooper in The Force Awakens, and I saw in the credits, has also done voice work for Rogue One. So he's very well placed in the Lucasfilm industry. He knows a lot about the Star Wars music. It's hosted by the Star Wars podcast Rebel Force Radio. There are 37 volumes out there you can listen to of really, really good Star Wars analysis, so I would highly recommend that you check them out. So, I do plan to come back to these themes, but for now, as R2-D2 says, toodaloo.